You're seeing this MAGA civil war getting worse and worse, messier by the day, with more big names jumping in to fight. And while some on the right, they've tried to dismiss this as some sort of sideshow, this is so much bigger and more important than they'll admit. And I mean, there is a very real fight over the future of MAGA and the right in general taking place. Right? They can try and act like this is some small little blip, the loud minority, but the numbers show that's a lie. And while this has been brewing for a while, and you can go back to my Monday and Tuesday shows for a deeper recap, the quick version is that recently things kicked off because Tucker Carlson interviewed white nationalist Nick Fuentes on his show last week. And among a decent chunk of the right, that sparked some backlash because Tucker is seen, even though he's not with Fox News anymore, as kind of this institution. He has a huge platform. In the interview, it was friendly, and Fuentes, among other things, talked at length about what he called organized Jewry. And so a whole bunch of conservatives, most prominently Ben Shapiro, Mark Levin, and Ted Cruz, condemned Tucker and Fuentes. But then you had a lot on the right coming to their defense, or at the very least, Tucker's defense, arguing that he was merely exercising his free speech and shouldn't be canceled. And well, now the latest high-profile pundit to make that argument is Brett Cooper, and very notably, Brett is a former Daily Wire host who was once dubbed the female Ben Shapiro before she left and started her own show.
They're doing all of this. They're freaking out because of how popular and impactful Tucker is. Tucker, right now, is the #1 podcaster in the world. He is neck and neck with Joe Rogan as they ignore the obvious shift in ideology and attitudes of their base. Because you're so angry that the conservative base's attitudes are rapidly changing, that Nick Fuentes is getting national attention, and unfortunately for you guys, yes, the attitudes are changing, so again, it makes sense.
Right, over the course of her show, she took shots at several people, including Mark Levin.
Hitler admirers, Stalin admirers, Jew haters, American haters, Churchill haters. You're damn right we're going to cancel them and deplatform them.
Also, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham.
But if you ever run for office as a Republican, and you embrace this weird shit, we're gonna beat your brains out.
As well as Republican Representative Randy Fine.
Tucker Carlson is the most dangerous anti-Semite in America. He has chosen to take on the mantle of leader of a modern-day Hitler Youth.
And you had Cooper going after all of them for pretty much the same reason. Hypocrisy.
This is just so incredibly hypocritical. Like, haven't we all collectively sat on our shows, sat on X, and talked about how dangerous it is and how irresponsible it was for leftists to just call anybody they hate a Nazi? It is the same kind of inflammatory rhetoric that killed Charlie Kirk.
And then with all this, a comment that you made that probably got some of the most attention was a comment about Randy Fine, who's Jewish.
I mean, he obviously, I'm sorry to say, but he obviously cares more about Israel than he does, principles like free speech. So, buddy, like, my advice to you, Randy Fine, is just move to Israel at this point.
Right, and that seeming to echo something that Fuentes said to Carlson last week.
If you're China first, you should live in China. If you're Mexico first, you should live in Mexico. If you're Israel first, maybe you should go live in Israel.
Right, it also appeared that Fuentes himself took her comments the same way because he posted on X. Daily Wire alum Brett Cooper says Randy Fine should move back to Israel because he cares more about Israel than free speech. You're never going back to the way things used to be. Enough is enough. America first. But then we also heard a much different take on the fighting from Daily Wire host Matt Walsh, who blamed the Republicans' embarrassing defeat on Tuesday's elections on exactly this kind of infighting.
We've watched the right-wing commentariat rip each other to shreds over offensive group chats and podcast guests and so on. Right now, a lot of people are kind of drawing lines on the right. But here's the line that we really need. Conservatives who have actually shown an ability to win and move the needle culturally and politically on one side versus conservatives who have never contributed meaningfully to any victory at all. And after last night's elections, it's clear that we should just not listen to those people ever again. In my view, the right must unite against the people who want us dead.
Though then you had Fuentes responding to him saying your fence sitting has grown tiresome, with him then going on to post about what he called lunatic Israel first Jews and ethno-narcissistic bullies. Right? Despite calls for Walsh and a few others for unity, that really doesn't seem to be what's happening. At least not at the Heritage Foundation, right? Because one of the biggest things that catalyzed this civil war was a video statement that its president Kevin Roberts put out last week.
We will always defend truth. We will always defend America, and we will always defend our friends against the slander of bad actors who serve someone else's agenda. That includes Tucker Carlson.
Right, and that it shocked a number on the right to see the head of mainstream American conservatism's most prestigious think tank throwing its support behind Carlson here. And then actually on Monday night, Roberts partly apologized during a speech at Hillsdale College.
A few days ago, I posted a video, truly with the best of intentions. But I have to tell you, to the students, that this old history professor made a mistake. And my mistake was not saying we aren't going to participate in cancel culture. We're not. My mistake was letting that, which we will never backtrack from, override the central motivation that I had in doing that. There's one of those ideas that really worries me. It's an idea that has become cachet, not just on the left, but on the far fringes of the right. And that's anti-Semitism.
But then Roberts also apologizing again personally to his own staff yesterday, reportedly saying, I made a mistake and I let you down and I let down this institution, period, full stop. And then adding that he was willing to resign, but saying that he felt a moral obligation to clean up the mess he created himself. Though none of that appears to have been enough to prevent this rift from tearing part of the organization apart. Right? Because you have the Washington Post reporting that at least 5 members of its anti-Semitism task force have now resigned in protest. Distinguished fellow Chris DeMuth has left. And there was another fellow, Amy Swearer, who reportedly told Roberts to his face that his handling of the controversy was, quote, a masterclass in cowardice that ran cover for the most unhinged dregs of the far right. But this also is others at Heritage felt differently, with one person, for example, at the meeting reportedly asking what would happen to those who agreed with Roberts and Carlson, and another comparing staffers who spoke with reporters to Judas. Even Roberts' own speechwriter, Evan Myers, reportedly suggested that Heritage's attempts to address accusations of anti-Semitism would eventually mean he'd be required to attend Shabbat dinner, which he said would conflict with his faith. To which another executive reportedly shot back, I'm deeply sorry that you cannot see that as a generous offer, but rather a personal attack on you. So clearly there's a lot happening, and we're gonna have to see what happens with Roberts' leadership there. But also, amidst the fighting, we got to hear from Carlson himself, because he went on Dave Smith's show and explained that he initially had reservations about bringing Fuentes on.
For one, Nick had attacked my family, my father, my wife, one of my children by name. For another, as I've said a million times, I thought he was a Fed. I did suspect that. I don't know if that's true or not. I raised that with him. But basically, in the end, I decided Nick Fuentes can't be canceled. They've been trying since he was a freshman in college. It doesn't work. In fact, he's gotten bigger. He is enormously talented. Anyone who denies that is lying. And he has like a not fully coherent, but a semi-coherent kind of position. And I would like to hear what it is, because that's kind of my job. And I'm also interested because he's the most influential voice for men under 30 in the United States.
But then with all that, you have people like Ben Shapiro, the National Review, and the Wall Street Journal countering that Tucker's defense that he's just an innocent journalist doing his job and hearing people out, it doesn't hold up to scrutiny. With them arguing that he barely challenged Fuentes at all, he never brought up his worst comments and just let him say things like,
we do, on some level, need to be pro-white.
Without any objection whatsoever. And that is, it's very clear that Tucker is more willing to grill the absolute fuck out of a guest if he wants to, like he did with Ted Cruz.
You're a senator who's calling for the overthrow of the government, and you don't know anything about the country.
And so from that, you had the National Review concluding, why would Carlson choose to take an oppositional tack to a senator who has been fighting for conservatism for decades, but not to a podcaster who praises Stalin? The obvious answer is that Fuentes is an avowed Jew hater, while Cruz is a staunch supporter of Israel. Right? And then with everything that's happening, you did have Carlson kind of saying that it all appears to be about Israel and the future of the GOP.
This is a fight over what happens after Donald Trump. What does the Republican Party look like? What happens after Trump goes? And that's what this is about. That's why they're vesting the energy in this. That's what the rage is about, because they don't want to lose control of foreign policy. I just can't say that enough. It's about foreign policy. They don't care about domestic policy because they don't care about the United States.
Right, but also with that, you have people who argue that the Civil War, it's at least as much about anti-Semitism as it is about Israel. For example, Jamie Kirchick saying in the Washington Post, this episode has forced an overdue reckoning on the American right. For far too long, the problem of anti-Semitism has been allowed to fester there because too many conservatives have been reluctant to speak out against its chief propagator. Finally, its battle lines are being drawn. But ultimately, that's where we are for now, though. We're going to see more, right? There appears to be no shortage of creators out there, and even politicians throwing haymakers. So while we wait to see what happens next, I'd really love to know your thoughts, opinions, and reactions here. But then next up, in a different kind of news today, we need to talk about this just crazy Shein sex doll controversy. Or because France just announced that they're moving to suspend Shein because they discovered that they were selling incredibly childlike sex dolls. Also understand, when I say childlike, this is the doll in question. It straight up looks like a little girl holding a teddy bear. I know I probably shouldn't say this, but whoever came up with this idea or made this, can we set them on fire? To the moderators, that's just a hypothetical question, not a call to violence. But connected to that hypothetical question, you had the Telegraph describing a doll as having an erotic body and having realistic genitalia. And so the outrage has been massive across the board. You had France's Consumer Affairs and Fraud Control Agency saying that the product leaves little doubt as to the nature of this content. And you had France's finance minister adding, if this behavior is repeated, we will be within our rights to request that Shein's platform be banned from the French market. Now, Shein defended themselves, saying the listing came from a third-party seller and that they're reviewing how they were able to circumvent the screening process. Or with the company also removing removing the listing and banning the sale of sex dolls, saying the fight against child exploitation is non-negotiable for Shein, and adding, "I take this personally. We are tracing the source and will take swift, decisive action against those responsible." But then the whole situation got bigger because you had French reports saying that Shein was also selling weapons like machetes and brass knuckles on its site. And so you saw France deciding to launch proceedings to suspend the website. It was unclear exactly how the suspension will work or when it'll go into effect because, according to reports, Shein's website was still available in France on Thursday, but it just had no third-party products. But business ministers did visit Paris's major airport and blocked 200,000 parcels to be examined by a consumer watchdog. And as far as how long this will last, you had officials saying as long as necessary for the platform to demonstrate to the authorities that all its content is finally in compliance with our laws and regulations. But also, that's not where this ends, because this morning you had the country urging the EU to also step in, urging the European Commission to promptly conduct investigations to shed full light on the malfunctions that led to the marketing of illegal products on this platform. And also, like I said, this is just the latest backlash that Shein's been facing in France. Because Shein also just opened up its first in-person store in Paris, and unsurprisingly, a lot of people who live in the fashion capital of the world aren't stoked about the biggest fast fashion retailer planting its flag there. So you saw protesters outside for a number of reasons. Some taking issue with the sex dolls that were on sale, but also, before that controversy, there were almost certainly already going to be protesters there. Right? And that, in part because Shein has long faced criticism for its negative impact on the environment, as well as allegations of inhuman labor practices. There was even a petition opposing this store getting over 120,000 signatures. Hell, some brands even opted to pull their products from the BVH department store where it's at in protest of its choice to sell Shein products. Or with one co-founder saying, "Shein, for me, is even worse than not being paid. It's a shame on Paris. It's a disgrace. You cannot be a sustainable brand and be in the same space as these people." That said, though, France hasn't said whether or not the suspension decision will impact the brick and mortar store, and while there were tons of outraged protesters, there were also tons of shoppers lined up outside. So for now, we're gonna have to wait to see how the dominoes fall. And then we've got more we're gonna dive into in just a minute, but first let me say, that passion project, that side hustle, that list of business ideas just rotting in your notes app, I want you to make today the day you commit to making that thing real. Because I get it, life's busy, it's so easy to procrastinate. I did it with building my book club website forever. But, and I kid you not, the DeFranco book club, it went from someday to launched in under an hour with today's sponsor, Squarespace. And it just couldn't be easier to build a site to show things off or to start selling content, courses, physical or digital products. I mean, whatever you've got in mind, you can do. Even let's say, you want to charge a one-time fee, offer a subscription, both. Done and done. All while they've got stunning templates that look like you hired a designer, and their Fluid Engine editor, it lets you drag, drop, customize, no coding, no stress, no excuses. My team even uses Squarespace for our Daily Dip newsletter, where tens of thousands of y'all get your PDS fix in your inbox every weekday. Right? News polls, giveaways, PDS show notes, all run through Squarespace. Like clockwork, a Daily Dip issue went out today, and your project vision could be next. So hey, take the first step today with a free trial at squarespace.com/Phil or scan that QR code. Today is launch day. Just remember, when you're ready to go live, use code Phil to get 10% off and let them know we sent you. But then, next up today, armed agents dragged this woman out of the Chicago daycare facility where she worked and arrested her in front of the kids, with the video of the arrest seeming to show them slamming her face against the glass doors before then pinning her down against a parked car as they tried to handcuff her. And witnesses saying this woman was saying, "I have papers," in Spanish before she was forced against the car. And you had one parent saying this was an abduction and it left everyone crying, terrified, huddled together, and adding, "To do it in a place where children are with complete disregard for what children see, there's no low these people won't stoop to." Right? And you had school officials confirming the woman had authorization to work in the daycare, had undergone a background check, and also said that the agents failed to present a warrant before entering the private facility. Then DHS spokesperson Tricia McLaughlin offered an alternate version of events, saying ICE law enforcement did not target a daycare, saying officers attempted to conduct a targeted traffic stop of this female illegal alien from Colombia, and then going on to claim that officers attempted to pull over this vehicle, which was registered to a female illegal alien with sirens and emergency lights, but the male driver refused to pull the vehicle over. And going on to claim law enforcement pursued the vehicle before the assailant sped into a shopping plaza where he and the female passenger fled the vehicle, and saying they ran into a daycare and attempted to barricade themselves inside of the daycare, recklessly endangering the children inside, and adding the illegal alien female was arrested inside a vestibule, not in the school. But then you quickly had local and state lawmakers organizing a press conference to condemn what happened and the administration's response. Right? And Congresswoman Delia Ramirez just straight up accused them of lying. And with that, saying that her office is working with the school to release video footage that she said will prove that the agents were in the school.
I'm reading what Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin wrote, and let me just be very clear. They lie. They lie over and over and over. I'm going to tell you, as someone that actually physically saw the footage inside the daycare center, they went inside the daycare center, questioned and took someone to her locker room to prove she had papers. We saw them run in and out, and you saw some of that footage already on WGN. They are lying here.
You then also had Congressman Mike Quigley, who represents the district where the daycare is located, noting that the woman arrested had a work permit. And notably, that's something that DHS didn't dispute, arguing instead that work authorization does not confer any type of legal status to be in the US, and adding, the illegal aliens work authorization was approved by the Biden administration, which exploited this loophole to help facilitate the invasion of our country. Which, if you didn't notice, just to call it out, whenever they talk about people, they talk about them like they're not people. And you should understand that's on purpose, right? Because people care about people. But that said, while we wait to see what happens here, it's of course just one incident of many. And in fact, literally within an hour of that woman being arrested, there was a hearing underway nearby regarding the alleged use of excessive force by federal law enforcement in Chicago. Right? And that, it's part of a lawsuit that was filed by several media organizations and protesters who accused agents of a pattern of extreme brutality and a concerted ongoing effort to silence the press and civilians. And already as part of this case, you've had U.S. District Judge Sarah Ellis issuing a temporary order banning agents from using certain riot control techniques, including tear gas and pepper balls against peaceful protesters and journalists. And then, after agents appeared to repeatedly violate her order, she added a requirement for body cam. And then finally, she ordered Senior Border Patrol Officer Greg Bovino to actually brief her each evening on the federal immigration crackdown in Chicago. And while an appeals court ended up blocking the order, Bovino, he certainly hasn't escaped scrutiny. Right at this hearing, you had attorneys playing a clip of him throwing tear gas canisters at protesters and claiming that he had lied about being hit in the head with a rock beforehand. And that is, they also played another clip of him grabbing and tackling a man to the ground during a protest. And notably, while acknowledging in a pre-recorded deposition that he made physical contact with the man, he denied that he applied force. Right, he also said he hadn't seen the agency's men or women deploy force against protesters. And then, of course, the government, they've argued that any use of force has been justified by claiming that protesters have been violent and have even threatened to kill law enforcement officers. Or with a DOJ lawyer saying such conduct must be rejected. To what extent does the freedom of speech protect individuals in obstructing and/or threatening conduct, throwing rocks, bottles, fireworks, surrounding and pinning down law enforcement officials? But also, with that, many witnesses claim that the agents' actions have been unprovoked. Just today, you had Judge Ellis going over in painstaking detail a bunch of times they violated her order and saying she'll issue an even more sweeping injunction against the use of force by immigration agents. But then also, that's not the only judge's order we need to talk about connected to all of this, right? Because many of these violations, they took place in response to protests around an ICE facility in the suburb of Broadview, where people have not only been protesting Trump's immigration crackdown in general, but the conditions at this facility specifically. Because even though it's only designed for stays of roughly 12 hours, some people have been held there for days on end, and there are no beds and no working showers. Right? This is something that Kat ABUGHAZALEH went into detail on this week's In Good Faith podcast.
What are they doing behind the boarded up windows? Because ICE has literally boarded up the Broadview Processing Center windows with plywood. We have heard months ago, we heard about people being denied beds, people sleeping on concrete, grandmothers and pregnant women, dozens of men in a single cell, no access to hygienic facilities, no hot meals, being held for days or weeks at a time.
So if you want to hear more from that after today's show, I've got links for you in the description. I highly recommend it. But, back to the news. This week, you had a judge listening for hours as former detainees described what they called inhumane conditions at the facility, testifying that besides being denied access to lawyers, they had no soap or toothbrushes and were forced to sleep on uncomfortable chairs or a concrete floor. And that's on top of claiming that the toilets were overflowing and in plain sight, saying that there was garbage everywhere, and they flagged other issues with the availability of food, medical care, and drinking water. With all this, McLaughlin, the DHS spokesperson, she denied the allegations. Instead, saying despite hoaxes spread by criminal illegal aliens, the complicit media, and now an activist judge, the ICE Broadview facility does not have subprime conditions. And with that, among other things, she claimed that detainees were provided with 3 meals a day. But very notably here, not even the government's own lawyers seemed to back that up, saying she had been told detainees were offered 1 hot meal a day, and detainees mostly disputed her claims anyway. And so in the end, you had the judge describing the alleged conditions as unnecessarily cruel and saying that he found the witnesses highly credible. And then adding, the evidence has been pretty strong that this facility is no longer just a temporary holding facility. It has really become a prison. So with that, he issued a temporary order requiring authorities to improve conditions at the facility. So for example, he ordered the holding rooms at the facility be cleaned twice a day, the detainees be allowed to shower at least every other day, and that they have 3 full meals daily as well as drinking water on request. And then he went further, requiring officials to provide detainees with clean bedding and enough space to sleep, as well as personal hygiene products and prescribed medications. Right, and then also, on top of that, his orders barred immigration agents from misrepresenting documents provided to detainees to sign, because attorneys, they claim that that had been done to get detainees to unknowingly relinquish their rights or agree to deportation. And you had one of those attorneys explaining that now they cannot slip in a form written in a language somebody doesn't understand, and then all of a sudden that person gets whisked out of the country. that coercion has got to stop. With all this, these cases have a long way to go. And there's reports of stuff like this happening all over the country. So we're gonna have to wait to see how this ultimately ends up. But then next up in the news, this is big. Starting tomorrow, airlines in the US, they're gonna start slashing flights first by 4%, but that's gonna hit 10% by Monday. With the only exceptions being international flights, which shouldn't be affected. Or with Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy adding that the delays would affect 40 airports across the US. And then that was followed up by Federal Aviation Administration Administrator, say that 10 times fast, Brian Beeford, who said, as we slice the data more granularly, we are seeing pressures build in a way that we don't feel if we allow it to go unchecked will allow us to continue to tell the public that we operate the safest airline system in the world. And while initially it was unclear which exact airports were going to get hit, we now know the list includes a who's who of every major US airport. So major carriers are starting to warn passengers that these cancellations are coming all across Twitter and said that those affected would be reached out to. And these cancellations and reduced flights, they're unfortunately needed because of the ongoing shutdown. Or because airport personnel like the 13,000 air traffic controllers and the 50,000 TSA agents, they're overwhelmed not only because of missed paychecks, though that matters, but also because of massive increases in their workloads. Now, major airlines, they try to make things a little easier for ATCs by offering free meals following their first paycheck getting missed. A sandwich and a side, it doesn't pay your mortgage, your gas, your electricity. And so, while by law, they're required to still work through a government shutdown without any pay, they're not allowed to go on strike. They're taking sick days and PTO instead, or with who knows how many taking side jobs in the meantime because you have bills to pay. This is happening at a pretty large scale with so far 30 of the largest airports seeing 20 to 40% of their ATCs call out. And keep in mind, and I'm probably talking to the choir here because we've talked about this in the past, but even before this, the United States was already struggling with a massive shortage of ATCs. And then, of course, remember the timing, even when everyone's showing up, the holidays are already expected to be a hellscape at airports. And so now we have this situation that's having a cascading effect. And overall, you have airlines estimating that so far, the government shutdown has affected 3.2 million travelers, and the cancellations, they're just gonna make that number skyrocket. Which, just as an aside, I feel for everyone being impacted by the shutdown right now, but I especially feel for the air traffic controllers. That already is considered one of the most stressful jobs in America where, one mistake, it possibly kills a lot of people. And now things are even worse. It doesn't feel like there's an end in sight. You're being treated like a pawn because it feels like whether it be these air traffic controllers or really anyone else in the government affected by this shutdown, it feels like the ruling party, they have control of everything, right? The Republicans and Trump, they're using these people as hostages and they're counting on essentially the Democrats to care about human beings, other Americans more, and that they're gonna give in at some point. For now, we're gonna have to wait to see how this shutdown continues. And for everyone else, if you're planning to travel for the holidays, expect it just to be crazy out there, right? Hope for the best, but really prepare for the worst. But that, my friend, is the end of today's show, but I'll give you a little extended outro today. One, if you didn't get my email today, I got an early Black Friday deal going on at beautifulbatch.com. We're talking 60% off stuff on the homepage. Get what you want while you can. Let me clear out that warehouse so I can get to an awesome thing later this month. All right, treat yourself. You deserve it. You're going to love it. So two, if you're looking for more to watch, there's a bunch. You've got my newest Crashing Out podcast with myself and Alex Perlman. This one, it's doing really good numbers. I think it's a lot of people's favorite so far. I highly recommend you check it out. Definitely subscribe, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. It's my new favorite thing that I do, along with the other one, which is my new podcast, In Good Faith, where I interview someone once a week. This week I had Kat ABUGHAZALEH on. Fantastic watch, but I've also had a bunch of other guests. Links again to that down below. And then three, let me just say thank you for watching. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here next time.